Okay, in this video we're going to talk about objects and what they are and how they're related to classes. And the big picture is that an object is a specific instance of a class. So you can think of a class as a blueprint for how to make something, and an object as the specific objects that were made from the blueprint. Alright, so let's take a look at our class, in a sense classroom, right? Our computer science 1301 classroom. We have several students in our class, right? Every student has a name and they have grades, and so say we want to keep track of that sort of thing. So here are three specific students, say from a class somewhere, a classroom, let's say. So you can see that students all have similar characteristics. They all have a name, they all have an ID number, and they all have scores on test 1 and test 2. But they vary from student to student, of course. So you might ask, okay, how would we keep track of all this stuff within some Java application that we're writing? Alright, so from one student to the other, the only thing that really changes, right, is the variable assignments that you would have to make. So in other words, student 1's name was Anne, right? So in that code we would just say, okay, name is equal to Anne. For student 2 we would say name is equal to Barry. Student 3, name is equal to Carl. Okay? So instead of creating variables for each one of those things, what you want to do is just define a class, right? Sort of a blueprint for how you would keep track of all the student information, and then for the specific students you would create multiple objects. Alright, so here is the first example of our student class that we're going to write. You can see it is a class, right? And the name of the class is student, and then inside the class body we have 4 fields. Right, a field in other programming languages they call a field a global variable, but for us in Java we just call them data fields, or just simply fields. So you can see we have 4 of those. They're just variables: name, ID num, test1 and test2, and their corresponding types: string for name and ID number, and int for test1 and test2. Alright, so how do we fill in the information, right? We want to keep track of those things for specific students. What you would do is create a new student object, it should say here, within the class. So we've gone through and we've defined our class, our student class, and then say we have 2 variables here, student 1 and student 2, and we want to create new objects based on that student class that we did. We would just use the keyword new, and then the name of the class that we created, which was student, and then parentheses open and closed right here. So that would create an object that we can refer to as student 1, and from the class, right, the blueprint student that we made before. Student 2 is also an object that we will create from the class student. And so now then we can go in, and in these classes, student 1 and student 2, we can fill in the variables to whatever it is that we want. Alright, so the code would be set up like this. We would go in and create a class student with these 4 fields in there. Notice that's extremely simple compared to what we've done before. There's no main method or anything, or any other method for that matter, inside this class here. So it's a little different than what we've done before. We couldn't run this class, right? If we compiled it, and it would compile fine, but then if we tried to run it, it would give us a hassle because there's no main method in here. But remember, what we're using this class for basically is just to hold the information that we want for each student. Excuse me. If you wanted to use this in a application, here is an application, and it has the main method. So this is more along the lines of what we've done so far. This has a main method, so I can compile it and then run it, and let's go through what would happen right here. So compile this class and run it. So here I'm declaring a variable student1, and if you look at its type, right, it's type student. So that's sort of a new thing, although we have sort of seen that before. When you define a string variable, the string is a capital S, just like this one, indicating that that is a class. Those kind of types are called reference types, when you make a variable based on another class right here. And so in Java you can sort of make your own types right here, and that's essentially what we're doing. We're making a type of variable called student that will hold this information here. And so in this line we're just declaring student1 is a variable of type student. In the next line we go ahead and we instantiate a new object, create a new object based on the student class, and we assign it to student1. So the variable student1 that I declared up here before, I want it to be a new object of type student. And so now it would create a new student, and it would basically be blank. It would be a sort of a copy of this, and then all we would have to do is go in and fill in these values right here, and that's what we're doing in these 4 lines. So student1, right, that's the object that we created up here, and then dot, and then name, right, name is one of the fields within the student class. We're going to say, hey, let's set that equal to and then we do the same thing for ID num and test1 and test2. So we declare a variable of type student, we create an object called student1, it's blank at this point, and then we go through and we set all the fields in here with the data that we want. And then you can check that. If you print that to the screen, you're going to have and here, and it will also print the ID number, or no, actually test1, right, the value right here. So again, you can declare, once you create your class, you can declare it as a type, right, and then assign that variable to be of that type, and then to actually create a new object, it's the new keyword, and then the name of your class, and then open and close parentheses. And we'll talk a little bit more about this part right here when we get to constructors. So there is one really bad thing about what we've done right here so far, and that is, once the data is assigned, anybody can view the data for any student, or for that matter change it directly, right? If you go back and look, if somebody had access to our code or access to this program, right, they could go in and just directly set their values for test1 and test2, right, which is a bad idea. And also, you know, people can figure out, view other people's test grades and change them, and so that is just not a good situation, right? It's actually a federal law that you need to keep student data private, right? You can't share that with the public, just like medical data. So to fix that problem, what we're going to use is the private access specifier. So here's our student class again, and for instance, if we wanted to keep the name field private, we would put the private access specifier in front of the declaration right here. And when you do that, what that means is that you couldn't directly go in and change that value in there like we did before. So the minute I put private right here in front of this field, if I go back to this code that I had before, right here in this line, when I tried to directly set the name to Ann, if I had a private in front of the name right here, it would give me an error right there. It said, no, you can't do that. Okay, so that's one of the general principles of object-oriented design, is that you want to keep the data within the class where you define it. You don't really want other classes to be able to mess with it directly in here. So to fix that, I would put the private access specifier in front of the variable declaration, and then when you do that, if you actually do want people to be able to use or change or view that string right there, you would have to add a set method and a get method. Those are called accessor methods. Set name, right? It has a parameter string n, and it just sets the name to whatever you specify it. And then get name, you need to return the name, right, so that people could look at it right here. Those need to be public, right, meaning that I can call those from outside of the class. And notice they don't have the static keyword in here because we want those to be able to only be used when you create a specific instance, an object, right, from this class. So there's no static here either. So now you may say, wait a second, it doesn't make sense here. You just said I'm going to put private here because I don't want people directly messing with this field here. In other words, being able to mess with it from another class. But then you go ahead and allow people to do that anyway. Well, the point is that yes, I did that here, but you can maintain some control about how people access it from within this method. So that's the preferred way to do things. You don't want to leave this data inside classes so that anybody can do anything they want with it. Right here, you could control how people access it, how people set it inside this method here, and how people get it here. For instance, you might have a check to see if the person using or calling this is an employee of the college, right? And then if you're an employee, you can look at those student records, right? And but if it's not an employee or if it's another student, then you would deny access in here. No, you can't set that, or you can't view it. So that's the point here. Yes, I am allowing access with this code right here, but you could go in there and deny it if you wanted to. So now that you have the accessor methods in there, the method how you actually access it is with a method call. So my object is student1, and if I want to set the name, I would call the method set name, and then to set it, I would put whatever I want to set it to inside parentheses here. I would pass that argument to the method, and the method would take that and set the name to it. And get name, I don't need to pass a parameter here, but here I'm using, in student1, I'm using the get name method to retrieve the name. Okay, so here's what my class would look like if I went in and changed all the fields to be private. So notice I've put private in front of all these as an access specifier, and when I do that, I need set and get methods for each one of those fields that I'm putting in there. So that's what I've done here. And then here's my actual application where I'm using this class that I defined here. And again, I declare a variable student1 of type student, and I create a new object and assign that to student1. And then I use the set methods to set the fields within there. Student1, that object that I created up here, I'm going to set the name to Ann, the ID num to this, the test1 grade to 92, and test2 grade to 85. And then I'm going to print the results to the screen, and how I would do that again is with the get methods here. So the student1 object that I created, get the name, and then print it to the screen. And so if you compile this and run it, this is what it would look like. So that's a brief introduction to how to create your own class types to hold information right here, and how to declare variables of those types and create objects based on those classes, right? Remember, this is the blueprint, right, of how you would do that, and then here's how you create an object, a specific one of these from your blueprint, and here's the preferred way to set those fields in there, right? When I created, it's blank, right? name, ID num, test 1 and test 2 hold nothing, and so here I go through and set all that information, and then here I am accessing that and displaying that information here. So that's one thing you could do. You could create new student objects for each student in the class to hold this information here.